Hello. Norwegian authorities repeatedly emphasize that the United States is Norway's most important ally. Do the German Chancellor and the Canadian Prime Minister still believe that the US can be trusted when it comes to security in the north?
At a NATO military exercise involving 30,000 troops from 14 nations, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney stood alongside the leaders of Germany and Norway and delivered a message that the entire world, including Washington, will be paying attention to, because this wasn't just another NATO press conference. It was a moment that revealed something much bigger. Canada is stepping forward as a major security power in the Arctic. And in doing so, Carney made it clear that the future of Arctic security may depend less on the United States and more on a coalition of democratic middle powers working together. At a time when Donald Trump continues to threaten alliances, question NATO, and even flirt with territorial ambitions in the Arctic, Canada is building something different. A new network of partners, a new defense strategy, and a new role on the global stage. The setting for this moment could not have been more symbolic. Norway, one of NATO's most important Arctic countries, a massive military exercise known as Cold Response, and more than 30,000 soldiers from 14 nations training together for a single purpose, defending the high north. Standing alongside European leaders, Carney began by emphasizing something that is becoming increasingly important in today's geopolitical climate: the strength of alliances, not just alliances built around power, but alliances built around shared democratic values. And in a world where those alliances are being tested like never before, that message carried enormous weight.
We are like-minded. We hold basic values constantly dear. But we're recognizing at the same time the value of our strength. We're all investing heavily in our defense and security, and we all recognize that we are much stronger together. Stronger together when we cooperate in areas such as space, cooperate in defense, but also cooperate with other like-minded nations. And there's no better illustration than Operation Cold Response.
But the real focus of this press conference wasn't just about military exercises or NATO cooperation. It was about the Arctic. And the Arctic today is no longer just a frozen frontier at the top of the world. It has become one of the most strategically important regions on Earth. Beneath the ice lie vast reserves of critical minerals, energy resources, and future shipping routes that could reshape global trade and geopolitics for decades to come. That reality has already triggered a new wave of global competition. Russia has been expanding its military infrastructure across the Arctic. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and is investing heavily in northern shipping routes and resource projects. And then there's the United States under Donald Trump. Trump's obsession with Greenland, openly talking about acquiring the territory and gaining control of its massive mineral wealth, shocked governments across Europe and Canada when he first floated the idea. But for countries that actually live in the Arctic, it revealed something far more serious: a new geopolitical reality where even long-standing alliances could be tested by resource competition. And that's exactly why Mark Carney's message in Norway mattered so much, because instead of reacting defensively, Canada is doing something far more strategic. Carney is moving first, investing tens of billions of dollars in Arctic defense and infrastructure, expanding Canada's military presence across the north, and transforming the Arctic from a neglected frontier into a fully defended and economically connected region. In other words, while some leaders talk about taking territory, Carney is making sure Canada controls its own.
We made a commitment to change fundamentally our defense strategy to be present 365 days a year in land, sea, and air, in a territory that is 40% of our land mass and 75% of our coastline. I would add also a territory that shares a 3,000-kilometer border with the European Union. Part of that commitment comes with major investment. We announced yesterday over $40 billion of investments in the Arctic, in defense and security and economic security.
But the most revealing moment of the press conference came during the questions from reporters, because one question touched directly on an issue that had been quietly worrying many NATO allies. Can the United States still be fully trusted when it comes to Arctic security? For decades, Canada and the United States have worked together to defend North America through systems like NORAD. Their militaries are deeply integrated, their intelligence networks operate side by side, and historically, the Arctic was considered a shared responsibility. But Donald Trump has changed that conversation. Over the past several years, Trump has repeatedly attacked NATO allies, questioned the value of long-standing defense partnerships, and openly suggested that territorial ambitions like acquiring Greenland should be back on the table. For European countries and Arctic nations, that rhetoric has created a new level of uncertainty. And that uncertainty is exactly why Canada is adjusting its strategy. Mark Carney didn't reject the alliance with the United States, but he made something else very clear. Canada will no longer assume that someone else will defend the Arctic for them. Canada will do it itself, and it will do it alongside partners who share the same values. Countries like Norway, Germany, and the broader NATO alliance. It's a subtle but powerful shift. Because while Trump has spent years undermining alliances and threatening international cooperation, Carney is doing the opposite. He's strengthening partnerships, expanding Canada's presence in the Arctic, and building a coalition of democratic nations prepared to defend the region together. And in a world where the Arctic is becoming the next geopolitical battleground, that strategy could prove far more powerful.
Hello. Norwegian authorities repeatedly emphasize that the United States is Norway's most important ally. Do the German Chancellor and the Canadian Prime Minister still believe that the US can be trusted when it comes to security in the North?
Yes.
Yes. Is that? Do you want me to elaborate on that? We have our defense of the North is integrated. I'll give an example through NORAD, which is, since for my entire lifetime, has been the integrated listening post air defense system in the Canadian North and High Arctic, fundamentally integrated with the United States. So we have that level of trust for that system. But I will say at the same time, and this was a huge element of what we announced yesterday, is that we are, as Canada, are taking control and responsibility for defense of our Arctic, more control and responsibility for defense of our Arctic. We will do that by very large investments, some of which we announced yesterday, and we will do that in partnership with our closest allies, very much including Norway and Germany, and if I may broaden Norway to include the Nordic countries and the Baltic countries to some degree, because there's an integration of the Nordic-Baltic 8 through NATO. So we're broadening out those partnerships. That makes us stronger, as does taking more of the responsibility ourselves. Thank you.
And that shift is exactly why this press conference mattered so much, because it showed something that analysts are beginning to notice across global politics: the rise of what some call middle power coalitions. Countries like Canada, Germany, Norway, and other European allies working together to defend democratic systems, secure critical regions, and protect the rules-based order, not as rivals to the United States, but increasingly as partners capable of acting independently when necessary. And in the Arctic, where resources, shipping routes, and security risks are rapidly increasing, that cooperation may define the balance of power for decades.
Some of the announcements that have been made just recently, the Prime Minister in Yellowknife yesterday, this is all about asserting our sovereignty over the North, over that Arctic area, because we know there are incursions from the likes of the Chinese, from the likes of the Russians. And, you know, we also have to assert our sovereignty in that area because, frankly, we have to be concerned that we might get Greenlanded by Donald Trump, who, you know, looks at the critical minerals that could be opening up there and thinks to himself, I wouldn't mind just scooping those up. So
what happened in Norway today was more than a routine NATO appearance. It was a signal that Canada is stepping into a much larger role in Arctic security, a signal that European allies increasingly see Canada as a key partner in defending the High North. And perhaps most importantly, a signal that the future of global security may not depend on a single superpower, but on a network of democracies working together to protect the regions that matter most. In the Arctic, that moment may already be beginning, And Canada is positioning itself right at the center of it. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dive analysis on the biggest geopolitical stories shaping Canada and the world.